Welcome everyone to the game between two of the best classical players in the world of chess right now. We have Fabiano Caruana with the white pieces taking on Domaraju Gukesh. Caruana fresh from his victory at the US Championships and in great form takes on Gukesh, who won the gold medal on board number 1 at the European Club Cup and also helped his team Super Chess win the gold. So this is going to be a very exciting encounter. Also, games between Gukesh and Fabiano are always super thrilling. Although Gukesh has a plus score against Fabi, and he would be looking to pull one back here in his hometown, that is St. Louis. We are at the Clutch Chess Champions Showdown, and this is the third round of the day. They'll play two games against each other with opposite colors, and this one is the first game. The players are ready, a handshake between them, and we are ready to go. This, dear friends, is the Duolingo game of the day. Duolingo is an app where you can learn a lot of languages, but now they have introduced chess, so it's time for you to download the app and get better at tactics and strategy. Pawn to c4 by Caruana, e5 by Gukesh, pawn to g3, and knight comes out to f6, bishop g2, and now h6 played here by Gukesh. A small waiting useful move, kind of telling Caruana, if you bring your knight out, I can now go bishop b4, and that's why he had played the move h6. Pawn to e4, grabbing space in the center, but it does weaken the d4 square, and Gukesh plays his pawn to d6, calmly just connecting his pawns. Knight comes to e2 and knight to c6, taking control of the d4 square here. And Fabi plays his pawn to h3, stopping bishop g4 ideas. This setup that white has gone for is known as the Botvinnik's triangle. It's a very interesting setup because you do weaken your d4 square, but you get very firm control over the d5 square. The bishop drops back and looks at this long diagonal, pawn to b4, and bishop goes back to a7. Now this is a very nice bishop that you have on this long diagonal. Gukesh thinking here, he can castle. He goes knight to d4, and Fabi can pick up the knight, but then bishop takes d4 will happen, so he brings his bishop out to e3. And now Gukesh needs to think, should he take on e2? He actually plays c6, and Caruana cannot take on d4. e d4 would fork two pieces, so he simply castles for now. And Gukesh also castles here. White has more possibilities here with f4 on the cards. King h2 is a good move here. He plays it coming out from this diagonal and later preparing the move f4, which could be very strong. Well, what will Gukesh do next here is the big question. He plays his pawn to b5. I love this move, gaining space on the queen side, and just f4 by Fabi. He's opening up on the king side, but the bishop on e3 is slightly loose. There could be knight g4 ideas here, and he goes bishop g4. Wow, what a move. If pawn takes, knight takes g4, and you lose the bishop. So Gukesh making the tactics work for him. Bishop takes d4 taken here. And now do you take with the pawn or do you take with the bishop? Well, he takes back with the pawn, of course. Knight goes back to b1 because the knight was hanging. And now the bishop can be simply taken back. But b takes c4, d takes c4, and now rook e8 played by Gukesh. Well, he's absolutely not perturbed here. He's like, take my bishop, Fabi, if you want to. Well, it is a free bishop. And Fabi takes it, questioning Gukesh. Why did you give me a free piece? Well, of course, Gukesh wants to take on g4 with the knight, which he does. King goes back to h1, and now he can jump in with knight d3, but knight e3, but queen d3, and you can win the rook, but I'll have 2 pieces for the rook. So queen comes to f6. One of the plans is to go queen g6 and queen h4, h5 check, but knight d2 and knight f3 is a fantastic idea to play for. But he goes queen d3, and this is not a good move. Very quickly, Gukesh plays queen g6, not just threatening queen h5, but also the e4 pawn is under pressure. Bishop h3 played. And here, there are many interesting moves. You can break in the center with pawn to d5. There's f5 in the position. And Gukesh, thinking here, takes the pawn on e4. What a move this is. Well, how does it work though? Because bishop takes g4, queen takes g4. Don't you lose the rook on e4? Well, it's happening. Takes, queen takes e4, check on h3, king g1 forced, and now d3, unleashing the bishop on this long diagonal. If you had forgotten about it, knight d4 is kind of forced here. You must play knight d4. The position still remains even. But Fabi blunders. He pushes his pawn to c5. And Gukesh now can take on e2. Well, right now he's a rook and a piece down. Wow. What a game here. Gukesh playing like Paul Morphy or Mikhail Tal. Taking on e2 is a must. He's calculating perhaps d takes c5 as well, which is interesting. But taking on e2 is just winning the game. Yes, he takes on e2. Fabi needs to take back. Queen takes e2. So he takes it. And now pawn takes c5. He goes queen g2, trying to trade queens. But Gukesh takes on b4, unleashing another check. Rook f2 blocking. And now an important move here is queen f5 to come into d3, to come into c2, because this rook is pinned here. But he goes queen e6, one step behind than f5, and king h2 played. Now the rook is free to move. So that's why maybe taking the rook is a good idea here. It's time for Gukesh to calculate this through. What really is the best idea here? Well, he takes on f2, queen takes on f2, and pawn to b3. He pushes the pawn forward. But this will allow white to bring his knight out. Now, if you count the material, black does have 3 pawns for the piece. Also, the rook is active. The white king is slightly weak. So, black's position is preferable. Rook e1 played. The queen comes into c4. And he plays rook to c1. But this is not a good idea here. He's tried to defend the knight. Rook d3 played. In fact, a5, a4 was also a good plan. Fabi tries to pin here with queen e2. And pawn to c5. Gukesh having nerves of steel. Both players down to their last 10 seconds. A check comes in, king h7, and he brings the queen back to trade. And now rook d5, keeping the pawn on c5, seems to be a good idea. But Gukesh pushes the pawn. Can Fabi simply snatch the pawn here on c4? He takes it. And I believe Gukesh's idea is b2. To make the pawn into a queen. Yes, he pushes the pawn. Rook b4 played, trying to stop the pawn. Rook d4, and now knight c3, an important move for Fabi. It's a very important move that he must play. If he doesn't play it, he might lead to a lost rook endgame. He doesn't go for it. And now Gukesh winning here. f6 played. It's just one extra pawn, but your rook is active. It will go here and attack the pawn. And when you have an extra pawn plus an active rook, that's a big advantage. Rook comes back, and now it's time to activate your king into the game. Gukesh brings his king to g6. Has 13 seconds. Fabi has 15 seconds. King g2. Such positions are easy to botch up in such time trouble games, with little time. King f3, he goes h5, stopping g4. Rook c3, he goes rook a5, stopping rook c5, stopping all of Fabi's ideas. Amazing play by Gukesh. And here he can push already g5, but patiently pushes the pawn just one square. He knows he has all the time in the world. Maybe rook d5, taking away the d3 square from the rook. Yes, he does it. Rook d5. So now forcing Fabi to go to b3. And then he can take rook c5, taking this c3 square away from the rook. He pushes a4. Maybe Gukesh can push a5 forward. Yes, he does. Rook b3. And one step at a time, black is making progress. This has been an incredible endgame that Gukesh has played until now. Rook c5 played. And he goes rook d3. It's time to push the g pawn to g5, g4. And he does it. Pawn to g5. And Caruana now, well, he doesn't have too many options. He must take it. Otherwise, g4 coming in. He takes pawn. And maybe here rook to d8 played. How should Gukesh finish off this game? Well, he first goes pawn g4 check, king e3, gives another check, pushes the king back. And where's the finish here? Look at Gukesh there. He's trying to sort of concentrate and zone in like a hawk, which he always does when he thinks he's winning. Rook takes a4 is hanging, and also a check. He gives a check by the rook. King e4. And Fabi can actually win the pawn on a5. He takes it. A check further. King has to go down here. g1, h1. Yes, he goes king g1. And now Gukesh can move in with his king. King to f3. Takes on h5. King h3. Threatening a mate here. Well, king f1 was important, but that would have led to a lost rook endgame. Check. And now it's a lost king and pawn endgame. g2 check. And Gukesh is queening here. Fabiano Caruana resigns. What a game by Gukesh. Sacrificing first a piece, then a rook. And finally getting it all back with interest and calmly now putting back his pieces. He is truly playing phenomenal chess here and showing that he's not just good at classical chess but also at rapid play.
Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the game. I want to tell you about Duolingo. This app, I used it extensively to learn languages when I was young. But I'm so thrilled that it now has chess on it. If you are a beginner, there are beginners courses here. If you are an advanced player, you also have different kinds of checkmates, different types of tactics, opening ideas. So you can make use of all of this. And what is very exciting is the way in which it is being taught. Oscar teaches you, who is a fun-loving character and a tutor, and it will give you some hints. There are streaks which are created. There are daily tasks that you can achieve. There are rewards. You can play against Oscar, and there's also a leaderboard. By the way, I'm leading on the leaderboard. My ID is Sagar Chess 1. Let's see if you can challenge me and get ahead of me. Download the app Duolingo and start your chess journey, no matter what your level is. And let's get better at chess.